Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Nun Beis Amud Aleph, 52a of Maseches Kiddushin, and we're starting about 12 lines down the page. At the two dots, the Gemara refers to the Mishnah that brought a Maisa b'chamesh nashim. There was an incident with 5 women. The Mishnah, back on Nun Amud Beis 50b, said that there was a Maisa b'chamesh nashim, there was an incident with 5 women, and among those 5 women were 2 sisters, V'likit adam echad kalkala shel te'enim, and a man came and took a basket of figs, he gathered a basket of figs, B'shalahen haisa, it belonged to them, doesn't say who specifically, it belonged to someone amongst these women, B'shal shvius haisa, but it was also a Shemitah year, so that renders it ownerless. The Amar, and he said, Hari kulchem mekudashos li b'kalkala zu. He gave it to them and he said, you're all betrothed to me with this basket, v'kibla achas mehen al yidei kulan, and one of them accepted it for all of them. And the Chachamim said that these sisters are not mekudashos, and we already discussed the sisters quite a bit. So now the Gemara says as follows, Amar Rav, Rav said, Shma mina mimasnising arba. We can learn 4 things from this Mishnah. V'nakit Rav biyadei twas, but Rav only took in his hands 3 out of the 4. So he says there's 4 things to learn from here, but he only wants to take 3 out of the 4. We'll have to see what that means. What are the 4 things? So Shma mina, first of all, we learn from the Mishnah, Hamakadesh v'peir shvius mikudeshes, that if you betroth someone with fruit that's Shemitah fruit, it still works, because it worked in the Mishnah. It didn't work for the sisters, but it worked for everyone else, or someone else. It worked to make a Kiddushin, even though they were Shemitah fruit. Now, you might have thought, Rashi explains that you can't use Shemitah fruit to give a Kiddushin, because they're hefker, they're ownerless, and maybe it doesn't really become yours when you take it. You could take it, you can eat it, but it doesn't really become yours. We see from here that no, it becomes yours. You could use it for Kiddushin even. Additionally, he says maybe you would have thought, since it says that they should be for you la'achla, to eat, that you're only allowed to eat them, you can't do anything else with them. So the Mishnah teaches us that actually you could do other things with them, and you can use the fruit for Kiddushin. So that's the first thing. First thing is that you can use Shemitah fruit for Kiddushin. Ushmamina, and we also learn from the Mishnah, Kidsha begezel eina mikudeshes, that if a man betroths a woman with stolen items, it does not work. Afilu begezel dida, and even if he stole it from her. So you can't use stolen items, they don't belong to you, so they can't be used for a Kiddushin. And even if you stole it from her, you might have thought, well, she accepted it back as Kiddushin. It looks like she was mochel him. She forgave him for stealing it, and it now is his, and now he's giving it back to her. He's giving it to her. So you might have thought that. No, we don't say that. Mimai, how do we see from the Mishnah that if you try to betroth with something stolen, it doesn't work? Midiktani shalahen haisa, bishal shvius haisa. The Mishnah, because the Mishnah said that not only did it belong to the women, but it was Shemitah fruit. Taima de shvius, de hefkerhu. The reason that it worked in the Mishnah was only because it was Shemitah fruit, which is ownerless. Ha de shar shanei shavua. But if it was any of the other years of the Shemitah cycle, meaning it wasn't a sabbatical year, lo, it wouldn't have worked, even though it was from them, but it was stolen. So it wouldn't have worked. It only worked because it wasn't stolen, because it was a Shemitah year. So that's the second thing we learn. Ushma mina, and we also learn from here, Isha na'asish shliach lechaverta. A woman can be a shliach, can be an agent for her friend, which isn't such a chiddush, but the added chiddush, the added novelty here is va'afilu b'makom shenasis latzara, even in a situation where she's going to become a rival wife. So it's one thing for a woman to accept Kiddushin on behalf of her friend, and now her friend is married to someone, and that's one thing. But where in this case, one woman was accepting on behalf of all of them. They were all becoming betrothed to this man. So she was accepting it for her rival wife, and there are certain limitations between a woman and her rival wife, two rival wives. They're not allowed to give testimony about each other. But despite that, she can represent her as a shliach. That's what we learn from here. So those are the three things. The three things are, we learn from here that you can do Kiddushin with Shemitah fruit. We learn that if you try to do Kiddushin with something stolen, it doesn't work. And we learn that a tzara, a rival wife, can accept Kiddushin on behalf of another woman and can be an agent for her. V'idach mahi. So the Gemara says, so what was that fourth thing, right? We said there were four things, but he only kept three of them. So what was the fourth thing you learned from the Mishnah? The fourth thing is Kiddushin she'en misurim lebiyah. The fourth thing is, what is the halacha for a Kiddushin that cannot lead to a biyah? Right? Because that was our whole topic last week and the week before, dealing with if, here there's a Kiddushin to two sisters, and that's a Kiddushin that can never lead to biyah, because if he doesn't know which sister he's married to, actually putting that aside, if he's married to both of them, it can never lead to biyah, so it can't be a Kiddushin, as well if he doesn't know which one. So we derive a halacha from the Mishnah regarding that. Now he didn't count that halacha, so the Gemara asks, why not? V'nichshava. He should count it. Why? If there are four things to learn, why doesn't he count it? The Gemara says, Mishum demisafka le'ika Abaye ika Rava, because he was uncertain if the halacha is like Abaye or Rava. So we had a machlokus with regards to this. We had a dispute with regards to Kiddushin ha-misurim l'biyah, she'ein misurim l'biyah, a Kiddushin that can never lead to a biyah. Can it be a good Kiddushin? Abaye said yes. Abaye said it's fine. The Kiddushin takes effect. Okay, they might never be able to have intercourse. It may be forbidden to them, but the Kiddushin took effect. Rava says no. If they can never lead to biyah, the Kiddushin doesn't take effect. And as a result of that, they each had to read the Mishnah differently. We're not going to go all the way back into that topic, but that was back on Aleph Beis 51b. But they each had to read the Mishnah differently. And in truth, the Mishnah, there were two ways to read the Mishnah. And depending on how you read the Mishnah, it was either teaching you that Kiddushin, she'ein misurim l'biyah, Kiddushin that can't lead to biyah is not Kiddushin, or it was teaching you that it is Kiddushin. It was teaching us one of those two things, but it was just a question of which one. So it really is teaching us a fourth thing. We just don't know what that fourth thing is. Abaye says it's teaching us that Kiddushin she'ein misurim l'biyah does work, and Rava says it's teaching me that Kiddushin she'ein misurim l'biyah does not work. And depending on how you read the Mishnah, it's that fourth thing is going to be a different thing. And that's why Rav, even though he had said there's four things to learn from the Mishnah, but we can only be naked biyada, we can only take three, because he wasn't sure which one was correct between Abaye and Rava with regards to Kiddushin that can never lead to a biyah. The Gemara continues, it says, Ki salik Reb Zera. When Reb Zera left, usually means Reb Zera went back and forth, I think, between Eretz Yisrael and Bavel, Babylonia. So when he left Bavel, and he went back to Rabbi Yochanan in Eretz Yisrael, Amra lahashmaitza kamed Rabbi Yochanan. He told this over to Rabbi Yochanan, this whole discussion. Amar le, Rabbi Yochanan said, Mi Amar Rav hachi? Did Rav really say this? He was referring to the halacha that you cannot do Kiddushin with stolen goods. And he said, did Rav really say that? That you can't give Kiddushin with stolen goods? So, the Gemara says, V'hulo Amar? What, Rabbi Yochanan doesn't agree to that? Rabbi Yochanan does agree to that. V'hamar Rabbi Yochanan. Gazal, if somebody steals Belonis Yaishur Abaylim, and the owner never abandoned the object, meaning there's an idea called Yush. Yush means that you abandon any hope for it. Once the owner abandons hope for it, so then the person who stole it actually does acquire the item. And it's it. Now he still has to repay, but once the owner has abandoned it, has given up on it, the thief does acquire the item. So, but we're talking about before that. Rabbi Yochanan says, if a thief stole, and the owner did not yet give up hope on it, so this item, let's say it was an animal, a sheep, and they want to, or a bull, they want to be makdish it, they want to sanctify it as a karban, or donate it to the Beis HaMikdash. So at this stage where it's been stolen, the Rabbi Yochanan says, Shneim einam yacholim lahakdish. Neither person can sanctify this animal. Not the person who really owns it, and it was stolen from, and not the thief who stole it. Why not? Zeh lefi she'eino shelo. The thief can't sanctify because it's not his. Because it's stolen, and the owner didn't yet give up on it. V'zeh lefi she'eino b'rshuso. And the real owner also can't sanctify it because it's not in his possession. It belongs to him, but he doesn't possess it currently, so he can't sanctify it. But what we see is Rabbi Yochanan says that if you steal something, and the owners have not yet given up on it, you can't sanctify, you can't be makdish it. So too, if you steal, you can't use it for Kiddushin, it would seem. So Rabbi Yochanan seems to agree with Rav. So why would Rabbi Yochanan have said, did Rav really say that? That you can't do Kiddushin with stolen goods? He himself seems to hold that way. So the Gemara says, Hachi ka'amar le, this is what Rabbi Yochanan was saying. Mi amar Rav kavasi. Did Rav say like me? It was like, when he said, did Rav really say that? It was not questioning the validity of it. He was excited. Did Rav really say that? Wow, that's exactly what I say. And that was what Rabbi Yochanan was expressing. Okay, but the Gemara has a contradiction from a Brisa. The Gemara says, Meisvei. We have a contradiction from a Brisa. It says, Kidsha begezel bechamas uvegneva. If a man betrothed a woman with something stolen, chamas is where you force the person to give it to you. You pay them, but you force them to give it to you. Uvegneva. Geneva is also stealing. Geneva is thievery, really, and secretly stealing something. Gzela is out in the open by force stealing. Geneva is sneaking in and stealing. So, and Chamas is where you steal but you pay. You force the person to give it to you, but you pay them. So any of those situations, meaning he did that to someone, he stole from them in some way, and then he gave it to a woman for Kiddushin. O shechataf sela miyada, the kidsha. Or he grabbed a coin from her and gave it back to her as Kiddushin. Mikudeshes. It works. So we have a brisa that says that if you do Kiddushin with something stolen, it works. That seems to contradict Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. So the Gemara answers, Hasam begezel dida. Now there was different. There it was talking about where he betrothed her with something he stole from her. All of those cases were where he stole from her. And if he stole from her, and then he gives it back to her, and she accepts it, so that shows that she was mochel, she forgave it, and that's why it's a good Kiddushin there. Ask the Gemara, how can you read that into that brisa? Let me just see for a second. Yeah, how can you read that into that brisa? Hamidiktani seifa. From the fact that in the seifa, at the end of that brisa, it said, O shechataf salami shala, or he grabbed a coin from her, michal dereisha begezel da'alma askinon. That implies that the beginning was talking about where he stole from someone else. Because it says, if he is mekadesh her with something stolen, or if he grabs a coin from her and gives that back to her as Kiddushin, it sounds like the first case was where he didn't take it from her. So how can you say the whole thing's talking about where he took it from her? Says the Gemara, Perushi kumefarish. Now the way to read this price is at the end is explaining the beginning. Kidsha begezel bechamas uvegneva. If he was mekadesh her with something stolen, something forced, or something stolen in secret. And Ketzai, what do we mean? In what case are we talking about? Like where he grabbed a coin from her and was mekadesh her with it. Meaning that's what we're talking about. We're talking about where he took it from her. And that's why it works. But if he steals from someone else and then gives it to her as Kiddushin, that would not work. So So that's how we're going to resolve this contradiction from this brisa on Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. Now you might be wondering, what are you talking about? Rav said, even if you steal from her, it doesn't work. Veha, asked the Gemara, top of the next page, V'amasnisin de gezel didar. The Mishnah, or the inference from our Mishnah, is that it was is for a case where it's stolen from her. V'ka'amar Rav eina mekudeshes, and Rav says it's not a good Kiddushin. Meaning, remember, we had the Mishnah, and we inferred three things. And one of the things we inferred was, because the Mishnah says that he collected figs from the field of these women, or one of the women, Shalahen Haisa, it was theirs. But it was also Shemitah. So that implies, but if it wasn't Shemitah, but it was theirs, and it was stolen, it would be a problem. It would not work for a Kiddushin. But why not? According to what we're saying now, as long as he stole it from her, it should be okay. So this, even the way that we are interpreting the brisa seems to still contradict Rav, and really the inference from the Mishnah. So the Gemara says, lo kashya, it's not a contradiction. Ha de shadech, ha de lo shadech. It depends if they discussed the shidduch before. Was this a planned shidduch or not? If they already agreed to get married, so then when he steals from her and then gives it to her, so we assume that she's accepting the Kiddushin. They were planning to do Kiddushin, so it makes sense that she's accepting it even though he stole it from her. But if they never discussed the shidduch in the first place, and he steals from her and then he gives it to her and she accepts it, so there we don't assume that she's being mochel the stealing, she's forgiving the stealing and accepting it as Kiddushin, because they never discussed that shidduch in the first place. Okay. 3 lines down, and then Beis on the Beis 52b, the Gemara quotes a story. Hahi itza. There was a woman, dehava kamashya kara b'meshichla demaya. She was washing her feet in a trough of water. Asahu Gavra, a man came along, chatav zuzi mechavre. He grabbed money from his friend, v'shadala, and he gave it to her. Amar la, he said to her, mikadeshes li, be mikudeshes to me. And she accepted it. So the question is that Kiddushin? He stole it from his friend, gave it to her, and said, be mikudeshes, is that Kiddushin? Asahu Gabriel kamei de Rava, so that man came before Rava to ask the Shaila. He wanted to know, is she betrothed to me? Amar, so Rava said, Les techash lahad Reb Shimon. None of the other rabbis, sages, are concerned with the opinion of Reb Shimon. De Amar, stam gezela yeyush bailam have. Reb Shimon holds that stam gezela, the assumption whenever you steal from someone, is that the owner gives up. If that was the case, if we assume the owner gives up, so he stole the money, we assume the owner gave up, and at that point it belongs to the thief. Yeah, again, he has to pay back, but now this money is his. It's his, and when he gives it to the woman, it would be a good Kiddushin. That's if you hold like Reb Shimon, that stam gezela has yesh balam, that the assumption is when you steal that the owner relinquished and gave up on it. But says Rava, nobody is concerned for that opinion. We don't assume that. We do not assume that he gave up. And in this case, since we don't assume he gave up, we assume that he still expects his money back. He still anticipates getting it back. And therefore, it still belongs to him. And it does not belong to the thief. And therefore, the Kiddushin would not be good. The Gemara continues with another story. Hahu arisa de kaddish b'muza de shimchi. There was an aris, a sharecropper, who betrothed a woman with a muza de shimchi. A muza de shimchi is a handful of onions. Now, a sharecropper has rights to a portion of the field, which is part of the question here, because maybe you would say this handful of onions could be his, because he has a right to some onions in the field. So Asalu kamei de Rava. Again, right, so the point also is these weren't his onions. He took them from the field that he works in. But maybe since he has a right to them, or he has a right to some onions, maybe it should be a good Kiddushin when he gives it to this woman. So Asala Kamei de Rava. He came before Rava. Amar lei. So Rava said to him, Man achalach. Who forgave these to you? Meaning, these don't belong to you, these belong to the owner of the field. And they're not yours. And it's not a good Kiddushin. But says the Gemara, V'hani mili b'muza. That's true when it's a handful. I saw some understand it's also not just a handful, but it's a handful of like the heads of the onions. The point is that it's an amount that isn't easily replicated, to say that if they have equal share, so this is the sharecropper's share, and the owner also gets an equal share. About kisha, but if it was a bundle, which is a specific size, matzi amarle, then the sharecropper could say to the owner, Ana shakli kisha, I took a bundle, shkilat kisha, you take a bundle, kisha kikisha, a bundle for a bundle. In other words, as if it was a more measurable amount, so the sharecropper has a right to get from the field as long as he can measure it out. And I mean, here the implication is that the arrangement was maybe 50-50. But whatever the arrangement is, as long as he can identify a measurable amount, so he can say this was my share, and you the owner of the field will get your share. So then it's possible for him to acquire them, and the Kiddushin will be good. But if it was like a handful, just you grabbed something, it wasn't a measurable amount, so then it can't be his, because that we can't measure what he took to say, okay, you got your portion. So there, it's not his, and the Kiddushin will not be good. Okay. Hahu sarsaya dekadesh bepruma deshichra. There was a sarsaya. A sarsaya is a guy who makes date beer. He makes beer out of dates. And he takes a share. And he was kaddish bepruma deshichra. So he used a cup, a portion, these are the fruits, my bad. He used the dried out figs after they had after they extracted the juice from the dates. He took the dates and he used those for Kiddushin. Asamari deshichra, the owner of the date beer plant, came along, ashkachei, and he found him. And he said, when he heard that he had given those dates for Kiddushin, Amar le, he said to him, Amai lo teistim mehai charifa. Why didn't you use these even better ones? So he used dates that had already had all their juice squeezed out of them. They had, gone through a few runs of extracting the liquid for beer. And he said, you should have used these even better ones, which had, which were not as yet dried out. Now that implies that he was happy, that the owner was happy with what he had done. It's fine, you used it for Kiddushin, no problem. So is that a good Kiddushin? So Asal Kamei Rava, they came before Rava, Amar, and Rava said, it's not a good Kiddushin. Even though he seems to imply that he's happy with what he did, it's still not a good Kiddushin. And even though we have a similar idea in the context of Truma, we don't extend it over here. What's the similar idea in the context of Truma? So Rabba says, Amar, he said, Lo amru klafei tel yafos eloni in Truma bilvad. We only say that if a person says, you should have gotten the better ones, that shows that he approves. We only say that with regards to Truma. Detanya, because we're learning a brisa. Keitzad amru Torah mishalom midas trumaso truma. What's the case where a person can take truma without the owner knowing? So truma is that all produce has to have a section, a portion separated for the kohanim, and it's usually 1/50th. If one's more generous, they can take 1/60th. But the Torah doesn't delineate exactly how much it is. But let's say somebody walks into another person's field and separates, or walks up to, I guess, to his pile of grain, and separates truma from it. So, well, actually, the Mishnah that it's quoting gives the example. A guy goes into his friend's field, and he gathers the produce, and he separates truma. So, is that a good truma? Does that take effect? Because truma is a chalos, it takes effect. This is now holy food. Only can be consumed by a Kohen. So if somebody goes into his friend's field, gathers produce, and then separates truma from it, does it take effect? So the Mishnah says, Im choshesh mishum gezel ein trumaso truma. V'im lav trumaso truma. If there is a concern that we look at it as stolen, so then it's not going to be truma. If it's not stolen, then it is truma. But how do we know if it's being viewed as stolen or not? Hare, the way we know is sheba balabayis umatzo. The balabayis, the owner, comes and he finds him. Excuse me. So the balabayis, the owner of the field, comes and he finds that this guy separated truma. The Amarlo, and he said, "Kulachetzel yafos. You should go get even better ones than that for truma." So im nimtzu yafos mehem. If it's true, if there really are nicer ones, truma so truma, then we say that the truma that he took takes effect, because that it shows that the balabayis was fine with him separating this truma. He said you could have even taken better produce. The imlab, or if there's nothing better, ain't truma so truma. I guess we view it as more like sarcastic. And if there's no better ones, he said you should have gotten even better ones. But there are no better ones, then we see that's disapproval. If the owner, instead of saying anything like that, he himself gets down and starts gathering and adding more truma, so benkach truma so truma. Then it doesn't matter what he said, the truma is good, because if he's taking even more, so it seems he was happy and approved of what this first person did on his behalf. But that's only with regards to truma that we have such a rule. That if the owner says, "Oh, you should have taken even better," that it's good, that the truma is good. However, over here in our case was where a man who was working at the date beer plant took some of the dried dates, the used dates, and used them for Kiddushin. And the owner came and said, "Oh, you should have taken even better dates." So there we do not say that that's an expression of approval of the Kiddushin. He just did it, he just said that because he was concerned for the other guy's embarrassment. But it's not Kiddushin. He came along, and he, he busted him. He saw that he had used these dates he wasn't supposed to use for Kiddushin, so instead of embarrassing him and calling him out for it, he said, "Oh, you should have taken even better ones." But he really didn't mean it. That's what we assume. He really was just trying to spare the person from embarrassment, and therefore, in this case, it will not be a good Kiddushin. Okay, next time, Ritz Hashem, we'll start the next Mishnah.